Hello. I am joined today by the delightful Miss Sarah Mackenzie from the Read Aloud Revival podcast and readaloudrevival.com. And Sarah, I wanted to have you on to talk to you just a little bit about books, what you've been reading, and to share a story with you. Did you know that you completely re-inspired my reading life?
Okay, what? First of all, I'm always game to talk about books. You know this, like my favorite thing ever, but I need to hear this story.
Yeah. So a couple years, it was like over a year ago now, right? You had a mother's reading retreat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. For Read Aloud Revival. And you did this in September, right?
Mhm.
August. I think it was
August.
August.
I think it was August.
Yeah. And I thought that sounds like so much fun. And so I attended the retreat. I just kind of like snuck into the little rooms and listened to all the stuff that was going on and just had a blast. And you guys talked about just books and reading journals. So I jumped on that bandwagon for a while and did reading journals. But it also inspired me to revitalize my local book club.
Oh, how fun.
Yes. So we had not met since 2020, that year.
Right.
And so I reached out to some ladies and from church, and I'm like, "Hey, do you want to come and join me?" And they did. And now we have like 9 ladies who meet every single month to talk about books that we're reading.
That's so fun. Who picks the books? Like, do you pick them or do you rotate or how does it
Oh,
work?
no. I don't pick them. So I'm like the administrative person, right? So I
Okay.
like set up the group me and stuff like that. But we pick them as a group. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and we had like a couple of really voracious readers. And this is like the really cool thing. You never know who's going to be sitting like across the pew from you in church who is a huge reader
Yeah.
because we don't always just like talk about books or something all the time. And some of these ladies, they read so much. And so they're the ones who are constantly suggesting books. So yeah. So I just
That's
wanted
so
to
fun. That's
thank
really
you.
exciting to hear too, because we are doing that reading retreat. Again, we're going to refresh it, but we're doing it in January of 2025.
All
Because
right.
it's been a little while. Yeah. So that's so fun to hear you say that. I'm like, oh, that's great. Cause yeah, I think it's really common for a lot of us to like, we read for pleasure usually when we're younger, but then we get busy. And then, especially as like homeschooling moms, we're reading for something, either like to pre read something for our kids or because it has to do with school or like to be a better mom. Like, I'm going to read this book because I think it's going to make me a better mom or a better wife or a better whatever to improve ourselves. And we forget sort of the delights of just reading because it's completely delightful.
That is so much fun. Yes, because that was the thing for me. I had really kind of gotten into this rut of reading because I was supposed to, or reading because I should, reading something because that's the thing I should read to make myself a better mom, or because I'm a homeschool mom or something like that. And it had really sucked the joy out of reading for me for the longest time. And so I kind of got into a position where I just stopped reading altogether. And
Okay.
it wasn't until that reading retreat that I started back up again. So thank you. And this is great because this is coming out in December of 2024. And
Perfect.
yeah, everybody can just go check out that reading retreat. I'm sure if you go get on the email list, request a book list at readaloudrevival.com, you'll be able to get on the email list and hear about that retreat when it opens up. And you have some book lists for moms over there as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We usually come out with a fresh one too for these reading retreats just because it's fun to like well, part of the problem, I think, well, at least for me, part of the problem when I get into a reading rut, which happens regularly, um, is because I've read too many books in a row that had just not captured me. So, like, I need someone to come and be like, okay, here's one that you can't put down. Here's one that I couldn't put down. You're like, okay, sometimes that doesn't work because everybody has different reading tastes, but it's really helpful to have a list. And like, as soon as you get one experience of like getting where you're completely ignoring your laundry and, like, staying up way later than you want to because you can't put the book down. You're like, "I forgot how much fun this is, and I haven't had this." And it's, like, not just fun, but it's also, like, available to you no matter how many kids you have or what your schedule's like or how much homeschooling is dominating everything you're doing right now. Like, you do have this like free source of joy available to you. We just kind of forget. And we either forget or we just get into a rut. And it's hard to be a reader if you're reading a book after book after book. Like none of this is capturing me. So
I love it. Okay, I love it. So, how do you choose which books you put on your list, especially for moms over at Read Aloud Revival?
it's a very complicated system in which the basic driver is, did Sarah like it? Sarah, put it down. There's a little more to it than that, of course. But in general, like I am constantly reading all the time. I'm reading so many different kinds of books and I ditch books pretty quickly. So if I'm reading a book and by like, at least by 25% in, if I'm like, this is not a book that I'm going out of my way to come back to, I will usually ditch it because usually by about a quarter of the way into a book is the author's best writing is usually in the very beginning. So if they haven't captured you yet at the beginning, it's probably not the best fit. And I just know there's so many wonderful books that uh, if I spend too much time on a book I just don't love, that I'm just not interested in, there's
So
other
you're
books.
giving us permission to be book quitters.
Book quitters. Yes. Actually, I really think it's true that the most voracious readers I know who are adults quit more books than anybody else. Because if you don't and you read a book and you feel like you have to get all the way through it, so you're halfway in and you're like, I've got to slog through the rest of this. I've just got to finish it so I can get to something better. The chances that you're like rearranging things in your schedule or staying up late reading or forgetting deciding that you're just not going to clean the bathroom today because you're going to read it a little bit longer or whatever, is very low because there's way too many other demands on your attention. So then you just don't read as often. And so I think people who are voracious readers tend to be book quitters as soon as you realize it's not right off the bat. I will say this. Most books are hardest to get into right at the very beginning, especially fiction, because you've got like different character names and places and you're like orienting yourself, especially a lot of the fiction I love is dual perspective. So there'll be like maybe one character who's 100 years behind the other character, it toggles back and forth.
Mhm.
And it takes a minute to kind of be like, wait, what's going on? And so there's like more mental calories have to be spent
Okay.
orienting yourself to what you're reading. So I don't usually let myself quit before it's not like rigid, but like about a quarter of the way through. But if by a quarter
Once
of the
you
way
have got
through,
through the exposition and you're like, now I know who everybody is, the
yeah,
plot started moving forward. Now I realize whether or not I'm going to like it or
because then you feel like I'm not quitting because I'm lazy, because I already got through the hard part. I'm quitting
right.
because this isn't a good fit for me, which is very
Right.
different than,
It's so funny because the boys and I started To Kill a Mockingbird in morning time very recently. And I read the first chapter. And at the end of the chapter, Thomas looked at me and he says, Mom, that chapter was so long. And I'm like, yeah, but they had to set everything up, right? They had to set up
yeah,
who the characters were and they had to set up the people. And you're right, that was the hardest chapter. And I told him, like, just stick with it. The other chapters are not as long. And so now we're not even 4 chapters in, but you can already see the difference in them as they listen. They're getting way more into what we're reading, from chapters 2 to 4 than chapter 1 was hard.
yeah. And you don't know the characters yet, so you're not really invested in them yet, which is what the author needs to do in the beginning of a new book, which is hard work too. But like, it makes sense that by the time you're a quarter or a halfway into To Kill a Mockingbird, your kids are heavily invested in what happens to Scout and all the people in the story. But before that, it's like you're reading about somebody you don't care about yet. So you have to
Right.
make you care first.
Okay, that's so true. And it's just like it never occurred to me to be a book quitter, but I think that might
Yeah.
no, seriously,
Yeah.
I think you're right though. I think that might be something that would actually help me read a little faster and just enjoy it more and consume more books because that's something, I'm sitting here looking at my list of books I've read this year
Uh-huh.
and I'm really only at like 18 or 19. And I'm like, I should be reading more than that. I feel like I should be a more voracious reader than that. And yeah, it's just not happening.
I'm pulling up
So,
my list too so that I have it in case you ask me
oh,
questions.
I'm going
Specific
to.
books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So I was like, oh, I better pull that up. Yeah, what I think a big part of it is our resistance to quitting because we don't want to quit. We don't want to feel like we're lazy. We don't want to feel like we're quitting because what if it's really good? That other person I love said it's really good. But if you at least give yourself like a uh what's the word I'm looking for? Like my metric is like 25%, then I know I'm not quitting just because I'm like, oh, you
Right.
know,
Okay, so there was one book. There's only been one book so far, but there was one book in book club that I just refused to read, and it was Demon Copperhead.
oh yes.
Did you read that one?
I didn't. I read the back and was like, that's
Oh,
enough. No.
that was me. And normally I will commit to book club books.
Yeah.
It's like, even
Yeah.
if I don't, and there have been a couple of others where I was like, no, I'm not so sure that I'm like spending time reading that one. Not many,
Yeah.
but I did it. But that one, I was just like, I'm not going to read that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, it's really bad when you're the person who leads the discussion. Actually, it's bad and it's good
Yeah.
because then I can just go and ask questions. So I just took my
Yeah.
list of
I'm like,
questions.
well, if you haven't read the book, actually, then your questions are really like from a curious point of view. Like, yeah, that can be really make for an intriguing conversation.
Yeah, yeah. But it never occurred to me, like, maybe I should just start reading it. And then if I don't, and that is the thing. I really don't know if I would have liked that book or not because I did never give it a chance. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So one other tip too, for people who are like, okay, maybe I could start quitting on books. Maybe. I know that I like to track what I've read, like keep a reading log of what I've read. And it does feel a little bit like, especially as a mother, where you feel like so much of what you do never gets finished. And you're like, but I finished this 25% and I want it to count. I put those books that I don't finish on my reading log. I just put an X next to it. So my reading log is in my phone. I just use the notes app. But I have I use a little red X and a DN, which means DNF. That's a name in the reading world. We call that a did not finish, right?
not finished.
And I just, DNF the books, but I still add them. Like, also, it kind of helps me remember 2 years later when I see it, if I'm like, wait, did I read that? Maybe I would like to read that. And I can kind of flip through my reading log and be like, oh, that's right. A lot of times I'll put a DNF and then I'll write why. Like, it's super slow or not my style or like way too creepy or too many swear words I couldn't hang in there, that kind of thing. Like whatever it is that is your pet peeve while you're reading or the thing that you just can't hang with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is so good. Okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try maybe 2025 is the year I become a book quitter and just see if that increases my pace and increases my enjoyment a little bit.
But you know what else? Sorry. One other thought about that I think is so helpful is it actually makes you more likely to read more, like to try books that you aren't sure you're going to love. Because I would be much more likely to try a book if I didn't go like, well, if I start that one, it has 450 pages. If I don't like it, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I'm going to be way less likely to try books I'm not sure about ahead of time.
Yeah. That is so true. Okay.
I'm done lobbying for this now.
Okay. No, I'm loving it. This is great because it just never occurred to me to do that. And I think there are probably a lot of people out there like me who are like, oh, if you start a book, you got to finish it. Because you're right. I am the mom. But I've done that with the boys. We were going to read, and then there were none.
Oh, yeah.
You told me you read that with one of your kids. And I was like, and I had read it for something. I can't remember what, but I had enjoyed it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to read this with the boys. We got maybe 2 or 3 chapters in and they were just like, no, Mom, not this one. And and so I did. I stopped and we went on and moved on to something else. But yeah, you're right. Okay, we can do that. All right. So let's do like a little book break. Have you read The Wishing Game?
The Wishing Game.
Okay. So now I'm going to have to look at it. This, it's about a children's author. Meg Shaver?
I don't think I've even heard. I have not heard of this. Happiness. Okay, tell me all the things.
Okay, so it's a children's author and he stopped writing books. So he had this traumatic incident and he stopped writing books. Okay. But later he has these 4 people who had read his books as children. And he brings them to his island and they have this contest where they've got to solve these clues. And so it was just a really delightful read. I loved it. So
I have not heard of it, but I'm definitely going to add this to my list because.
Okay, so where do you find books? Because I really struggle because I don't want. Now I do come to your book list and I'll print it out and let's see, The Secret Book of Flora Lee. That was one that I got from you this year, and let me see what else. I Was Anastasia was another one that you told me about. So I do get some books from you, but like I'm out looking for books, and I struggle so much with finding books because things like the book social media just they don't recommend the kinds of books that I like.
Yeah, that's a thing. Yeah. I think it's tricky, and when you find someone who really gets your taste. So, there is this bookseller. Her name is Avery Shelburne. Hi, Avery, if you happen to be listening to this. She is the children's book buyer at Fabled, which is a children's bookstore in Waco, Texas, and she can nail my reading taste like nobody else. So, I've been out to their bookstore twice for events. Both times she sent me home with a stack of books that I hadn't read before, and they've been 100 out of 100. Like, they're so like, I'm like, "I don't know how you do this, actually." And you show me all these new books I've never heard of, and I love them so much. Because I feel like this is where book quitting will actually be helpful because even if you find something that you're like, "Ugh, this isn't a good fit," you don't feel like you have to keep reading it. I just do a lot of I don't think I get book recommendations on social media that often, but I am more likely to look on websites. Um, and I read a lot of middle grade and children's books because I'm reading for our book list at
Yes.
Read Aloud
Yeah.
Revival. So in that case, I'll look at like Redeemed Reader. I'm trying to think of some of our other regular. I mean, people are always sending me book recommendations, so I feel like I'm never short of ideas. For adult fiction, harder for me. It's harder for me because I feel like I have um like a just a very particular taste. Like I don't want gratuitous open door scenes. I don't
Right.
want like a ton of swearing. Definitely don't want anything horror related. Can't have any kidnapping in it, and there can be no twin deaths. So just a few things that I'm like, I don't do these things in books. But every once in a while, when I find like I love it when I find a new author and I'm like, oh, I have to read everything by this author now. Oh, that doesn't always work out as well as I'd like. Um,
Yeah.
I just finished reading Impossible Creatures by Catherine Rundle. Have you heard of this?
Is that the one? Oh, it has like this bright, colorful cover.
Yes. Like
Yes.
Orange Dragon, I think, on it.
Yes.
Okay, so this one came out in the UK last year. Catherine Rundle is a um pretty well-known children's book novelist in the UK, I guess, but I hadn't read any of her works before. This one just published in the US. It's I would call it like I've heard reviewers saying it's like Narnia or Lord of the Rings. I don't think that's true. I would call it like a Fablehaven by Brandon Mull meets The Giver by Lois Lowry. Like there is like the essence of the book is at the very beginning we find out there's this whole world of the mythical creatures that have actually do exist. They just exist in this safe other world where the arc I always say this wrong. The archipelago. That's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
Archipelago.
Yeah.
I know so. Um, and there are guardians who are like keeping them safe from the world, the rest of the world. And it's like an adventure story. I don't know. I'm trying to think. That's the Fablehaven part of it. It's got all these mythical creatures, and they're not really creatures that she made up out of nowhere. They're like um mythical creatures from historical texts or from like
Centaurs and things like that. Yes.
exactly. Yes. And sometimes she like puts her own little twist on them.
Okay.
There's this hilarious Ratatoska, like that is a main character in the book that's really hilarious. Um, anyway, there's like the reason I say it meets The Giver is because there's like this philosophical question underneath it of like oh, like what is memory for? What's the role? Like what is our role as humans as far as like sacrifice and self-sacrifice and love. I read this book and was like, this book is so thoroughly Christian, but is way popular in the secular world right now. But it has nothing overtly Christian in it. It's
Right.
just very redemptive, like the story is. And there's even an apple that plays pretty prominently symbolically in the book. And I'm like, there is this. So anyway, I go look it up, and sure enough, she wrote this book, I guess, based on an unfinished epic poem of John Donne, and like, and it's a epic poem exploring the apple in the Garden of Eden. And I'm like, of course, this makes so much sense. But the book was actually, I could not put it down. My house was so clean that week because I listened to it on audio.
Oh, I'm like, that doesn't fit. Wait a
It
second.
doesn't fit unless you're listening to an audiobook. And then I'm just like looking around for other things to do because I don't want to turn it off. I just want to listen. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So I have kids who love Fablehaven and like The Giver. So
Yeah.
would it be good for them?
Definitely. I would
Okay.
recommend it probably for like at least 10 minutes. maybe 12 and up, kind of, your own kids. But I would say if you've got anyone who's listening, it's like the same intensity level as the later Harry Potter books. So they call it a YA book. I'm going to read it out right now. I'm reading a Harry Potter book with my twins, but when we're done, I'm going to read this one aloud with them because they'll totally love it. But there is like intensity, darkness. It starts with a murder. Just,
Okay.
those things.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, like your kids need to be able to handle the intensity of stuff.
I wouldn't read it with like a 6-year-old.
Right. Okay. Perfect. 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 Okay. That does sound really good. Yeah. I would say trying to find adult books. Like
Hard.
if I needed a kid's book or a teen book or something, like I know where I can go. It's either you or a redeemed reader or somebody in our community is going to suggest something or something like that. But yeah, it's the books for grown-ups and wanting to get, like, sometimes I just like to read about reading, or I like to like listen to a podcaster about reading or talk to somebody about reading. And it's really difficult to find those places that I feel like where it's a good fit for me,
Yeah, because usually they're either, what I have found is either those podcasts about reading tend to be either about like classics, which are great if that's what you want,
Right.
or are about like some of these more popular fiction books that are coming out right now that are edgier than maybe I'm looking for. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, where it's so Susan Meisner is an author that I feel like I recommend all the time because I've read everything she's written so far, and I've loved all of them, and that's really unusual for me, which
I think I'm reading one. Yes.
Okay.
The
Okay.
beautiful. Oh,
Only the Beautiful.
only the beautiful. That's it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that book. Yes. Yeah. I love her stuff. And so then sometimes I'll like go to her Instagram, for example. This is another way I find books. And I just see like, what books is she recommending? Because if she's writing books that I like, maybe the kind of books she's reading, they're not always sharing, but she actually does share books that she's reading on her social media account. So that can be like another little rabbit trail that follow. Yeah.
I've even gotten to where like I'll go to like Perplexity AI, which is like it's a search engine, but it's got a little bit of AI built into it. And I'll do things like if I love the Mitford series, what else
great.
can I read?
Yes.
And then see what kind of recommendations that it pops up for me. There's so many books out there that you've never even seen before.
Yeah.
And so
what would be interesting to do with something like Perplexity is to put in like, if I love like a whole bunch of different books that you love that are very different from each other. Like, did you ever read The Midnight Library by Matt Hayes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So like, if you, so I'm just thinking like the Mitford Library or the Mitford series.
Yeah.
Home in Mitford. I'm like, why can I not speak words? The Midnight Library, Only the Beautiful, like a whole bunch of books that are very different. What are some books? I'd be curious to see what it would do because I bet it would come out with some pretty good recommendations based on
It might.
Yeah. Because otherwise, what you can do, I mean, if you just did like a regular old Google search and like books that are like At Home in Mitford, it kind of depends on what it's going to give you. Whether it's like, well, we think you like books that are about cozy cottage type, like village, type stories, or books that are set in a certain part of the world, or books that have a clergyman as a main character. And that might not be the thing that you really love about it, but you might not even be able to put your finger on it. But if you name a whole bunch of different kinds of books, I wonder if it wouldn't have an easier time than we would targeting what is it about all of these books that I really like that would help you find
Okay,
more
I'm
like
going to
it.
try it. I'm going to
Okay.
want to try that.
Okay,
So,
tell me what it comes up with because I'll be so curious to hear.
Okay, yeah, I'll write as a prompt, and then we can put it in the show notes or whatever, and then you can
So
just go
fun.
in and
Okay.
fill in your blanks. Because you could even tell it a couple of books that you really don't like.
Oh yeah,
that are
which
kind of popular.
you and I used to have very
Yeah,
different book. I feel like our book taste has gotten closer as we've gotten older.
I thought about that as I was getting ready for this conversation, and it could be that they've gotten closer as we've gotten older. But I wonder too if it was just a few different books like that were really popular at the time that we kind of like disagreed on,
Yeah.
and then that made me think like, oh, the same kinds of books.
Yeah. Yeah. But I bet you're right. If you put in some books that you really like and then not books that you don't like, or not books that have, if there's something that you just are like, I do not want any swearing, for example, if that's something you don't
Right.
want in any of your reading, then you I bet it would probably get you a pretty good list. And if you're willing to quit at 25%, you won't feel too worried about just
Yeah.
starting a few off of the list.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So tell me a couple of things that you've read this year that you love. And then I'm going to share a couple of things that I've read this year that I loved. So,
Okay, I grabbed a couple off my shelf because I knew we were going to probably talk about books. Have you read this one? This is by John Acuff. All It Takes Is a Goal.
I have not.
Okay, another one that I listened to on audio, but then I loved it so much I bought the hardback. Actually, I think I own it in every format. I think I own the Kindle as well. I was surprised by how much I loved this one, and I can't even remember why I picked it up. I wasn't in a goal-setting mood when I picked it up, so that's not why. But he has this one exercise right at the beginning of this book called creating a best moments list. And he talks about how it's really hard if someone was to say, like, what do you want your future to look like? Imagine the best future you can and try and build toward that life, right? It's really hard for us to do that because we're literally creating a fantasy. Like, it's just like,
Fine.
so he says, instead, why don't you think about like in the last 10 years, what are some of your moments where you're like, those are some of your best moments? They can be big, like, oh, when a baby was born or when somebody graduated or something. But they could also be little moments like that one day that it was raining and I sat in bed all day and read. I don't know, any homeschooling mother, whoever did that, but it could be a little thing like, oh, when I was taking the kids on a walk and that snake slithered across the path. That was kind of fun. That was like one of those days that you're like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you use that list to kind of build out like, oh, how do we get more of those best things into our future? It just felt very instantly applicable. So I remember listening to this audiobook in the car. And then when I got to my destination, I opened up my phone and I opened up a notes app and I just started listing a best moments list, like best moments for myself in the last month. And I was just surprised at like, oh, it's like a gratitude list kind of, except
I was thinking that. Yeah.
yeah, it's almost just nuanced a little bit that it felt a little more effective for me than a typical gratitude list as far as like helping me then see things that I like could be in the moment and be like, oh yeah, this is one of those best moments. But like, I guess maybe helping me to be in the present more than I.
I love it. I love it. Okay. I like that one.
Yes, I interviewed him on my podcast actually because I loved it so much. And then this one is my new favorite. Have you seen this one at all?
I don't think I have.
Okay, it's brand new. The Myth Makers, The Remarkable Fellowship of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. This one is by John Hendricks. So he has done, this is a graphic novel, first of all, you should know, for, I think technically they're saying it's for older middle grade, like so for like 10 to 14-year-olds. I would say it's great for like 13, 14 and up. I mean, I think your 11-year-old could read it. There's nothing inappropriate in it. But the whole first part of the book, he is describing what the difference is between a fairy tale and a story and and fantasy. Like, what are the different, why do they matter? What's different about them? And it's very philosophical, but it's brilliant. Then he tells the story of Tolkien and Lewis's friendship. And it's done as a graphic novel that I really absolutely devoured in 2 days. It also has this really kind of fun choose your own adventure feel to it. So let me see if I can find one of them. There is parts of it where he's, for example, like describing the history of myth. That's what it is. I'm sorry. It's the difference between fairy tale and myth and stories.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's talking about the history of myth. Here we go. And then he says, like, you get to the bottom of this page and it's like the roots of myth. If you want to learn more about the roots of myth, turn to this portal. It's like a portal. And you take it to the back and he goes into like in depth about the roots of myth, or you could have just kept going on. So it's like there's layers upon layers. My only complaint is that I am getting old and this print is very small.
Okay. So I bought myself a new e-reader this year for that very reason.
Make that font as big as you can.
Make that font as big as you can make it. Yes, yes. Because large print books are really big and then,
yes,
not as available and you have to go find them and all of that stuff. So then it's
like a
really
grandmother while you're carrying them around, reading them.
Yeah. Because you see, like I have these all the time now. And
mine are right here, right in front of me. And then the worst part is I can't really see very well far away with them. So then I end up putting them on my nose like this, and my husband is like, "I can't. You're not allowed to read anymore if that's that's what's gonna happen to you."
So John and I are doing it's the Lucille Van Payne book, The Lively Art of Writing. And
I know that one.
oh, it is fabulous. It is so fabulous. It's one like I think every high schooler should do. It was the writing book I used when I was a senior in high school.
Oh, you did tell me about this before. Okay.
No, but like I went searching through Amazon to see if I could find a different edition. Like it's like this really thin, like mass market paperback, and you open it up and I like maybe 9-point type or something.
Why?
Like crammed really close together. It's horrible.
Yeah, they didn't believe in like generous line height back in the day or nice large margin.
None of that stuff. It is horrible. So yes, I totally feel you. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple, and maybe you've read them, maybe you haven't. So, 84 Charing Cross Road.
Love that book.
Maybe the best book I've read all year.
Wow. Okay. Awesome.
I mean, it was, I really, really, really loved it. And then we read West with Giraffes.
I've never heard of this.
Okay, so this one is about, it's a true story. There were these giraffes that were sent to the San Diego Zoo, but they got caught in this storm. And so they landed in New York after this hurricane. And so they had to put them on a truck. This is in the Great Depression. And take them across the country. Such a good book. Loved that book.
It has 1 million excellent ratings, I'm seeing.
Yes.
Okay.
So really, really loved that one.
Okay.
And then The Boys in the Boat. We read that one for the Olympics this summer. And that was
a great book to read right before the Olympics. Yes, I love that one too.
Yeah. So that one was really good. And then a different book, The Women. Which is Kristen Hannah. That was the one that was set in Vietnam, which was so refreshing because every other book is set in World War II.
World War II. I was going to talk about that. We need to talk about World War II novel fatigue.
It's a real thing.
It's a real. I love World War II historical novels. There's a trend right now for World War II historical novels that are very bookish, like libraries and reading. And I love so many of them. And I'm also like, I got to read something else now because.
Please give me something else to read.
Yeah, totally. 100%. And putting all of these books on my TBR that you're mentioning.
Yeah. We read 450 from Paddington, which is a Agatha Christie book, but it's one of her later Miss Marple books.
Oh.
It was so strange because it was almost like a completely different author and then there were none.
Really?
So I had to go look it up. Like, did they have somebody else write her book? So she published this one in the 50s. And anything I could find was like, no, it was her. But the writing style was just so different. I ended up enjoying the book okay. But it was, I don't run out and get it unless you just absolutely love Agatha Christie and you want to read all of her books. But it was so interesting to me how different the writing style was from her earlier stuff.
Hearing you talk about Charing Cross Road, because that book is epistolary, like, all told through letters. Have you read anything by Catherine Ray, like Dear Mr. Knightley?
No.
For example, okay. So this one was recommended to me by our mutual friend Gretchen, and it's like it was a touch cheesy at times, I would say, but I still loved it and I still read the whole thing. It's an epistolary novel, and it's kind of a take on. It's like, I don't know if you ever read Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. It's like an old classic epistolary novel. This is like a updated, like modern version, but she's got lots of like Jane Austen references in there. It's contemporary. I think I'm looking at my notes about it because I was right. When I have a book that I love enough that I know I'm probably going to recommend it, I start making myself notes so I don't forget, like, what was that about? Or why did I love it? But I wrote,
isn't that your version of a reading journal, right?
That's my version of a reading journal. Yes. Yeah, I can actually show you. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull this up. Can I share my screen?
Let me share your, do that.
Okay. Let me see if I can. And I'll just describe what this is for people who are listening and not watching. But here's an example. This is an entry from, so again, this is just in my notes app. I don't do anything fancy. Can you see that? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I don't do anything fancy in mine because it needs to be easy and quick or I will not log them. Because I don't want to, if it's like a cumbersome process, I am not interested in then like doing it. So I just found that I quit logging if it's complicated. So this is
Right.
super simple. So I have one folder in my notes app that's called reading log. And then inside that folder, I have mini folders 2023, 2024, 2025 will have one, right? Like all the different years have one. And then in there, I just give each note, each title gets a note. And I have a couple of emojis that I tend to use. Star means like excellent, recommended everywhere. And this little green notebook is what I use to remind myself like you can recommend this on Read Aloud Revival. Because there's sometimes that I love a book, but it's not a great fit for Read
Right.
Aloud Revival. So I just put the green book to remind myself like you can recommend this one there. All I log is the title, the author, the date, and I put just the month and the year that I finished it. I don't like put anything more specific. And then if I'm going to recommend it for people, I make some notes. So on this one for Dear Mr. Knightley, I have RER, Jane Austen enthusiast Audrey, my oldest daughter. So sometimes I put specific people. And then I rate it out of 5 stars. Now, I never share star ratings publicly because I know way too many authors. I would be so stressed out about someone seeing like a 3.5 star or something from me. But I do rate them for my own self. So I remember, should I exuberantly recommend this or just like, hey, you might want to check out this book kind of
Yeah.
recommendation?
But sometimes you also recommend with caveats too. So
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and I would put that in here. If there was like language, I'd be like heads up for language or whatever that thing is.
yeah.
And then my codes are just for myself. K means Kindle, AB means audiobook. It's just I'm trying to remind myself if there's any middle grade, I'll put MG. You know, like if is it a kid's book, is it an adult book? And then any quick things that I want to write. So on this one, for those people who can't see it, it just says this was a fun, easy, lighthearted read. Maybe a touch cheesy at times, but I enjoyed it all the same. Strong Christian themes and lots of bookishness. Not high enough literary value for a mama book club because I pick books for a book club at our Read Aloud Revival community. And I'm always trying to choose something that has especially good language. So I didn't think the language was like enough for a mama book club, but could
Too much of
definitely
an
be on our
easy
list.
read. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is what I do for every book. And I can show you a DNF one. See if I can.
I don't know. Do you want to admit to
Yeah,
being
maybe not. I'm looking at some of my notes on these and they're a little harsh because nobody sees these. So I'm like, let myself really. Yeah, you know what? I don't think I'll share one of those. But it does have an X for the emoji that I give myself. Like, so I can quickly like scan through my notes and see in the title, it'll say like, if there's like a star, I know it's like a really good or an X. You know, if it's an open book emoji, that means I'm in the middle of reading it. So I've got these little things in there really just for myself because you're reading journal or whatever way that you track your reading, if you want to track your reading, needs to be something that you'll do often and that you like, it serves you. Like it doesn't really need to be for anybody else. It just kind of needs to be for yourself.
Right. Love it. Okay. So one of the things I really want to talk to you about, we talked about everything but
Yeah.
was reading challenges. So
Oh, yeah. Yes.
what is your take on reading challenges? Because there's such a big thing. Like everybody's got these reading challenges out there. I have thoughts. So I want to hear what yours were.
Yeah. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. Okay. Personality wise, I don't do especially well with reading challenges for a couple of reasons. One is that as soon as I get assigned something to read, I have this inner rebel that's like, that's the last thing on the face of the planet I want to read now, even if I assigned it to myself. And so I just want to read, like, I just want to pick up something. I have a long TBR list, which I also keep in my notes app. You know, what to be read for anybody who's not familiar with that term. So it's not like I'm not collecting books I want to read, but I just don't want to be told this is the book I have to read right now.
Even by yourself.
Even by myself. Yeah, it's a weird, now we all know why I homeschool my children. My rebel is very strong.
We're all control freaks. Like, don't let anybody tell you different. I mean,
That's so true. I usually am kind of interested in the challenges that are like, read this many classics or a book from this period of time or something like a little more open-ended that has you like reading broadly. They always appeal to me, but I don't find myself I think I've just noticed for myself, I read more and I have a better reading year when I'm not trying to like get to a certain number. And that's oftentimes what challenges are. Like, can
Yep.
you read 100 books this year? Then I find myself only choosing short books, definitely not quitting books because it doesn't get me closer to my goal. So I don't do super well with challenges, but I know lots of people love them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the ones that are appealing. Okay. So let me tell you my take on challenge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love to plan challenges. I never finish them.
Oh, this fits, I think, for you because, like, of course you would like to.
I like to like do all the research and all the planning, everything, but I never feel compelled to finish what I plan because for me, the joy comes in the planning. And then there's going to be like so many books that I pick out from that and just really, really love. And the rest of it, I just let go. It's kind of like me planning homeschooling.
Yeah, the planning is the best part, actually.
Planning is the best part. Yes. And I have no problem with all the stuff we don't get to. It's
Yeah.
not time
Yeah.
wasted. I enjoy the planning.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I feel with the challenges. I will say that the ones I think that appeal most to me, so there is this website that I follow, and you can't like I can't recommend like you like go out and get all of their books, but it's Book Girls Guide. So they
Oh, I
have
don't know
a
that one.
website. Yeah. And so usually I'll pick and sometimes they have something like, cozy mysteries for the month of November. And I'm like, I can read that in the bathtub, you know. And they recommend different books, and usually, they'll tell you if there's something in there that you're like, yeah, I'm not going to like that. But they do things like read through the decades, or read one book from every state, and then they give you these long, extensive lists of like books from every state or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's totally fun
Yeah.
to go and like say, oh, but I've never formally sat down and said, okay, this year, and you could even do it like over the next 3 years, I'm going to try to fill in this state map and like color in a book from every state or
Well,
something.
okay. So saying it that way actually makes me think like, yeah. So if I was to say I'm going to do a challenge where I'm trying to read a book about set in each state or something, one of my book choices a month is going to be part of that challenge. That I think I could get on board with. But I want the ability and the freedom to like when someone tells me you have to read this book, or if I'm wandering in a bookstore and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this book existed. I have to read it. I don't want it to then have to go on my stack. I want to be able to read it like next if that's what I want to read. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 And I even think like trying to do it like saying, okay, because that would probably feel too limiting to me to say one book a month has got to be okay, yet satisfies it. I think just like leaving it open ended. And then when I color in all the states, I've colored in all the states, and that's really great. And then if I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to read, which even sometimes when you're staring at a TBR list, because I have a pretty big one as well, none of it is appealing.
Okay, so I do this thing where I tend to, for everything that's on my TBR list, I tend to get this sample from Kindle, which I don't know if everybody knows you can do. So you can go, I have a Kindle. I do a lot of my reading on my Kindle. You can get the sample of pretty much any book that's on Amazon. And it'll give you like the first chapter or something. And I almost always get a sample before I buy a book, or before I start reading a book. Cause like I said, like you can kind of tell pretty quickly, do I want to keep reading this one or not? There was a day in the last month where I went through like 8 samples on my Kindle in one night, and I was like, "The world isn't making anything worth reading." I was so frustrated. I landed on something after that. It was fine. I got over my moment. But it is kind of helpful then to go, okay, like you said, I'm gonna do these, I wanna read through the states, and I don't know how long it's gonna take me. There might be one beach vacation where I read a whole bunch, and
Mhm.
there might be a whole 3 months where I don't read anything on this list, but I'm still working on it. Like, I'm still, I'm keeping my eye on that list or something. I like that. I could get into a challenge like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you could just keep adding books like on your TBR, and then you could like mark them and say like this would fit for this state or whatever. So I don't know. That seems way more fun to me than like I'm going to read a certain number of books this year, or I'm going to set up these categories and read these books in these categories,
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So huh,
I like
interesting.
that. I also think, sometimes I need more of it's something like a challenge probably to read like a hard book or a long book or an old book, even if it's not particularly hard, but it's long. Like David Copperfield is a book that I have started and quit on multiple times, not because I wasn't enjoying it, but it's like a 40-hour book on Audible and it's like so long. And so, but then I quit. I fizzle out on it and then I don't pick it up for a while and I can't remember what was happening. So I'm like, well, I got to start it back over because I don't know what's going on. And I wonder if I wasn't like, hey, this is just like the big book I'm trying to read this year. So that I could read it like over a longer period of time. Like instead of saying I'm not reading anything else, I'm reading David Copperfield. So every time I read, I feel like I have to pick up my classic.
Right.
Instead, having a couple books going where you're like, I am reading, I'm trying to read like a little bit from David Copperfield most weeks. I'm trying to do that. Not necessarily every week, but
It's most, you've taught me that most is better than, trying for perfection to hit.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Well, Sarah, tell everybody what new exciting things, because you guys do have something new and exciting. You have a couple things, but a middle grades novel, right? Coming from,
Yeah. So at Read Aloud Revival, we started a publishing house called Waxwing Books, and we're making books that we think are great read alouds for a wide variety of ages. So our first books were all picture books, and we have a new one coming out this January that's really funny and darling called Dear Duck, Please Come, about a rabbit who lost his tooth and sends his friend Duck a note letting him know. And his duck realizes, oh my gosh, a good friend thing to do would be to find his tooth if he lost it. And so he spends the whole book trying to find it. But we also have our first middle grade novel coming out, which is a middle grade fantasy. And if you're not familiar with the term middle grade, it actually usually means 8 to 12-year-olds. That's like the ideal reader for a middle grade novel is 8 to 12. But we love the whole family read alouds. So this one is a fantasy novel that you could read aloud with everybody from, even if you're 4-year-olds in the room to your 18-year-olds in the room, there'll be something. What I particularly love about this novel, written by Millie Florence, who was homeschooled herself, in fact, and is a young author, is that the book really offers something for everybody. So it's a fairy tale, and I think a 8-year-old is going to hear a different story than the 14-year-old, and different than you will as a 40-year-old, because there's just there's some deeper themes going on about what the darkness might mean. Kind of like if you were to read Snow White with a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 25-year-old, they're going to hear something different. It's that kind of story that has like that layered, which is what fairy tales do. So we're very, very excited. That one comes out January 7th. And actually, you said this podcast airs before then, right?
Yeah.
Great. So we have a kind of a fun thing going on right now that if you pre-order Beyond Mulberry Glen, which is the title of it, before its release date on January 7th, we'll send some bookmarks, a bookmark, a sticker sheet, and a signed book plate by the author to everybody who orders it before that date. So that's really fun.
So fun pre-order bonus for that one. And also the Duck and the Rabbit book coming out.
Yes.
And tell me the name of that one again.
That was Dear Duck, Please Come.
Okay.
And then we have this is 2025 is a big year for Waxwing. We have 4 books coming out. So we have 2 more coming out later in the year. And yeah, we're very excited. We've got some big, exciting things happening right around the corner. So it's been a lot of work behind the scenes, but in 2025, in 2025, it's going to be like, look like it's all coming out at the same time, but we've just been working on it for years. So
kind of like that duck. You're floating along on top, but those little feet are just really going underneath.
We're underneath the water. I love it.
That's so awesome. And you can find all of that at Waxwing Books or readaloudrevival.com. Go over and get those. We'll link to the mama book list for you so you can go over and sign up for those. And also check out Read Aloud Revival, the membership, because that's where that reading retreat is going to be in January. And if you've been just a little ho-hum and blah in your reading, I can 100% speak for the fact that this one will light a fire under you and get your reading life going again as a mom. So thanks, Sarah, for coming
to my ears. Thanks so much, Pam.